This is the Ogre Beast Riders army that I'll be in control of. It's 1,285 points. We have got a hunter who has been upgraded onto a giant bison and also a spear. There is an ice mammoth who has been upgraded with a chain trap and a harpoon crossbow. We've got a unit of 3 beast riders who are just standard, no additional upgrades on them, and finally a champion who has been upgraded with a big pistol, iron plate and a fang beast. These 2 hero units will be fielded as units on their own because we're quite limited as to how many units we've got anyway, and it just gives me more flexibility. For the AI controlled army, we've got 1,285 points of Havoc War Disciples, who have been joined by some Rift Demons of War. We have a Lord of War, who has been upgraded with a great weapon, a Hound Companion, and the Blessing of War, and he will be fielded with a unit of 3 Death Reapers, who have no other upgrades. We've got another Lord of War. He's been upgraded with a halberd, and he's fielded with a unit of 10 Gore Reavers, and those Gore Reavers have been upgraded with a command group, which gives them the fear ability. Then we've got a blood icon bearer with no additional upgrades, and he is fielded with another unit of 10 Gore Reavers with no other upgrades. And then for the demon allies, there's a unit of 10 blood warriors. They've been upgraded with a command group upgrade to give them fear, and also a banner of war, which gives the unit impact 1. And finally, a unit of 3 brass beast riders. They've been upgraded with a command group to give them fear. For the purposes of the AI rules, quite unsurprisingly, all of these units are considered to be melee units. There's no hybrids, no shooters, just melee. A strange comet has crashed in this arid desert, scattering shards of crystals across the valley floor. This has attracted the attention of a scouting party of Ogre Beast Riders and also a Disciples of War Lord. Both have come to see if there's anything special or magical about these crystals, and if there is, to try and harness the energy for their own means. In the centre of the table we've got Objective 1. Objective 2 is down here, near the Ogre's deployment zone, just outside the Ogre's deployment zone. Objective 3 is also just outside the Ogre's deployment zone. Objective 4 is just outside the Disciples of War deployment zone. And Objective 5 is in the crater. The crater itself is going to be classed as cover terrain, not that there's much shooting. The giant skeleton is difficult terrain, and all the other bits of scenery are blocking terrain, impassable terrain. The Ogres finished deploying first. They've got 4 units as opposed to the War Disciples 5, so the Ogres will get the first turn. The Ogres have started off with the Ice Mammoth advancing over towards Objective 3. There's not a lot of shooting in either of these armies, but the Ice Mammoth does have a couple of ranged weapons that will be in range of these War Disciple units over here. We're going to try and soften up the Blood Icon Bearer with his Blood Reavers, and it'll be using the Frost Sphere and the Harpoon Crossbow. Now, the other reason I've stayed quite close to this objective is objectives only count as being captured if there's a model within 3 inches of them at the end of the turn. So if I was to advance away from either this objective or this objective, then we won't have captured it at the end of the turn. So I'm going to have to go back for it in later turns. So for now, that's what we're doing. The Ice Mammoth, advancing forwards, staying close to the objective, and shooting at the Gore Reavers. Start things off with the Frost Sphere. This is one attack, hit on a 4, and that hits. Now this is Blast 3, so that'll be 3 5-up saves. Would you believe it? 2 of them save. But one of the Gore Reavers dies, and then the Harpoon Crossbow is also one shot, hits on a 4, which hits. Now this is AP 2, Deadly 3, but wounds don't spill over, and models with Tough get hit last, and the rest of the models are all 1 wound each. So this will only kill 1, assuming it doesn't make yet another 6-up save, which it doesn't. So 2 of the Gore Reavers die, so that's not bad. And for the Disciples of War activation, it will be a model on their right flank, and it will be that unit of Gore Reavers that we've just shot at, because they are the closest unit in that zone to an uncaptured objective. The Gore Reavers have rushed forwards past objective 4, heading towards objective 1. Now, initially I thought of stopping them an inch further back, that way the back marker would still be within 3 inches of objective 4, because bearing in mind right now they haven't captured it, but there is that unit of Blood Warriors at the back. They will be, when they get activated, they'll be rushing forwards as well, and they will definitely end their move within 3 inches of objective 4. So again, it makes sense for the Gore Reavers to move their full distance. For their activation, the hunter on his giant bison has rushed forwards towards objective 1, making sure that he's out of charge range from the brass beast riders over here. They'll have to charge round that giant skull with a piece of terrain, and they'll still be 3 or 4 inches away at the end of a rush move, so not in charge range. But for now, the hunter will have captured objective 1 at the end of the turn. The other units over here won't be able to get close enough to that objective to capture it, so that makes things a little bit easier for me next turn. But obviously we're going to be in charge range of quite a lot of nasties on the next turn, but that's the chance you take when you try and capture objectives early. But I've also found that if you don't capture objectives early, it's difficult to take them later on in the game. Bear in mind it's only a 4-turn game. Next activation for the War Disciples will be on their left flank. Brass Beast Riders have rushed forwards and are within 3 inches of the centre of objective 5. The Ogre Beast Riders have charged into the Brass Beast Riders in such a way that they are now contesting objective 5, and yeah, let's see if we can repel them off it. Ogre Beast Riders have got impact 4 each, 12 2-up saves, and they save them all, not a single one in there. Moving on to the Beast Riders' hand weapons, these are 3 attacks each, so that's 9 attacks, hitting on 4s, and that is not so good. That's only 3 hits, and these are no AP, so 2-up saves again, and they'll save. And then 9 claw attacks from the beasts, hitting on 4s, and I'm going to take these dice out and burn them. That's only 4 hits. Now these are -1, so these are 3-up saves, and saves them all. So no damage done whatsoever on the charge. Now the Brass Beast Riders are going to get a chance to hit back. 3 hand weapons hitting on 3s. 2 hit. At AP 2, this is 6-up saves. Ordinary 4-up, -2. 1 saves, 1 fails. So that's 1 wound on one of the Beast Riders. And then we've got the hooves from the Brass Beasts. 3 attacks each, so that's 9 attacks. Hitting on 3s. There's only 1 fail. And these will be 5-up saves. And 4 get through. Now fortunately, Beast Riders are tough 6, So that'll take it up down to 1 wound left. I already had it on 1, that was because it'd taken 1 wound, but it's down to 1 wound left, which is the way I like to do it with wound dice. Right, so the Beast Riders lost that combat, they now need to take a quality test, so on a 4 up they're going to be in a bad way. Sorry, in a 4 up they're going to be fine, less than 4 they're going to be in a bad way. So fortunately they pass that morale check, but now they need to fall back an inch. But on the plus side, they are contesting that objective. They won't get charged again because there's no other units in charge range, so they're not going to be hitting back on 6s. But I would have hoped for at least one of those Brass Beast Riders to be dead right now, and they haven't taken a single scratch. War Disciples' next activation is going to be the other unit over on this flank, which is the Gore Reavers with the command upgrade and the Lord of War, and they will simply rush towards objective 5. And at the end of their movement, they are close to objective 5, but the objective is still classed as being contested because there are enemy units within 3 inches of the centre of it. The only Ogres model left to activate, or unit left to activate, is this champion down here next to objective 2 on the Fang Beast, and he's simply going to advance forward, staying within 3 inches of the objective, and then take a shot at those Brass Beast Riders using his big pistol. Okay, so he's moved. Ideally I would have wanted to charge in, because again he's got impact and he's not so shabby in combat, and the Brass Beast Riders would be hitting back on 6s because they've already fought in combat. But I need to stay within 3 inches of objective 2 in order to count as having captured it at the end of this turn. So for now he's just going to take a pot shot at the Brass Beast Riders. So this is 1 shot hitting on a 3, and that's a hit. And this is AP1, so a 3-up save, and they pass. So still no wounds dealt to those Brass Beast Riders. And for the next activation for the War Disciples, there's no units left to activate over on this flank, so that would move clockwise onto the middle, and that would be the other Lord of War and his bodyguard of Death Reapers. This Lord of War and his bodyguard have rushed forwards past objective 4 and are heading down towards objective 3, or could branch off towards objective 1. The last thing to activate is this unit of Blood Warriors, and they will simply rush forwards past objective 4, but staying within 3 inches of it when they pass it, so they'll be counted to have captured that objective at the end of the turn. And at the end of turn 1, the Ogres have captured objective 1, objective 2, and objective 3. The War Disciples have captured objective 4, and objective 5 is currently contested. So moving into turn 2, we should see a lot more action happening, especially around objective 5, I would have thought, and around objective 1. The Ogres will get to activate first, because they finished activating first in turn 1. So let's go into the next turn and see what happens. The thinking and decision making process for the Ogre's activation. This unit of Brass Beast Riders is the unit that is most likely to activate first in the War Disciples turn. The reason being, there are units in this third of the battlefield and the centre of the battlefield. There are no units in this third of the battlefield. So on a roll of a 1 or 2, it will be this third that activates first. On a 3 or 4, it will be the middle. And on a 5 or a 6, there's nothing there, so it will go around clockwise back to here. So this section of the battlefield is twice as likely to activate as this section is. And it will be the beasts that go first. Now, having said that, they will activate first simply because they're closest to an uncontrolled objective. Having said that, if this unit this zone activates first, it will be this unit that activates, because again they are the closest ones to an uncontrolled objective. For all that they will activate first, or most likely to activate first, I am tempted to have these guys swing around and charge into these, simply because they're more likely to do more damage. These guys have got a 5-up defence, whereas these have got a 2-up defence, and having seen how poorly these guys did last time, I think I'd rather try and concentrate on taking out a unit, and if I position them close enough to this objective and also close to these, they should leave this guy alone. So I don't know if that's the right way of thinking. I am tempted to simply charge them again and hope that we do a bit more damage, but then I'm leaving them open to a charge from these guys. Although these guys are likely to do less damage. Yeah, it's a decision. I think I'm going to have to activate these. I just can't make my mind up whether to go for this unit, which is going to be more deadly, or this unit, which I'm going to be more deadly against. Okay, purely for the purposes of trying to make myself feel a bit better by actually killing some stuff, I have charged this unit. Whether or not that's the right way to make such decisions, probably not. We shouldn't make decisions based purely on emotion. However, yeah, that's what I've done. The rider that had 1 wound left has been shuffled over here, so if for whatever reason he might get killed in the charge back, or the return fight, the return melee, he'll be over there, so that the unit will still be closer to these guys than this guy will, because you take away the units that are already wounded, so he's all the way over there rather than being over here. Otherwise the rest of the models would be further away from the Brass Beast Riders than this champion is. So that's the logic. Let's see if it worked out. 12 impact saves of 5 up on the Gore Reavers. Would you believe there's 5 6s in there? But that's still 7 of them down. So that's not a bad start, but it could have been a lot better. 9 hand weapon attacks at 4 up. And that's a bit better. That's only 3 fail this time. 6 5 up saves. Makes 1. So that is 1, 2, 3. 3 more dead Gore Reavers. And technically that should be 2 wounds on the Lord of War, because at this stage you use the that's interesting, because you're supposed to use the defense value of the majority of the unit. Now at the time of the attack the majority of the unit was 5 up, so yeah, I think these are the defense rolls. So even then, we can assign those to... I suppose I should have rolled them one at a time, just in case. But for now, I think that's the way we'll do it, because at the time of that attack, the majority was 5 up. So that's the way we'll do it. So that is 1 wound left on the Lord of War. Please let me know if you think different. And then we've got 9 claw attacks. And that is only 4 hits, but these are AP1. So this will be 4 up saves with 1 to get through. And he fails 2, so that will finish him off. That's the unit gone. And the unit can then make a 3-inch consolidation move, and we've ended up just over 1 inch away from the Brass Beast Riders, with the injured one at the back, so if he does get finished off, we'll remove from the back. But yeah, that's where we are. Do feel a little bit better now. I've taken out 1 enemy unit, but there's still quite a few still to get through. Let's see where the War Disciples activate next. And that will be in the centre. It won't be the Brass Beast Riders. As I said earlier, if the unit activates first in the centre, it will be this unit here, because they are the closest to an uncontrolled objective. Now, the decision tree for melee units says that they should rush towards the nearest objective, they would charge if there was a unit in the way. There is no unit in the way. However, the melee section of the AI rule says they will always charge the nearest enemy. Now, I'm taking that literally, rather than being, if there's a choice of targets in charge range, they charge the nearest one. Because to me it makes sense that they wouldn't just simply rush up to that objective and then stop if they could have got into combat with an enemy unit. So to me, again, the overriding rule is do what makes sense. It makes sense to me for them to charge, because they'll still be within 3 inches of that objective when they complete the charge. So that's what we're going to do. This is what it looks like after the movement. The 3 at the back are just over 2 inches away, so they're out of range, so they won't be able to fight. However, we need to make a Phalanx dangerous terrain test because the hunter is armed with a spear. So we roll 1 die because there's only 1 model with a spear, and if it's a 1, one of the Gore Reavers dies. And that's a 5, so they survived the dangerous terrain test for the spear. Moving into the attacks, the Blood Icon Bearer has got 3 attacks base. He's also got Furious, so that gives him an extra attack on the charge. He's also got the Blood Icon, which gives him another attack. With the Gore Reavers, they get 2 attacks normally. They've also got Furious and they've charged in, so that gives them an extra attack, but they also get an extra attack for having the Blood Icon Bearer in their unit, so they'll have 4 attacks each. So I'm quite glad those other 3 aren't in range. So we'll do the Blood Icon Bearer first. Ordinarily he's got 3 attacks, plus the 1 for Furious, plus 1 for the Icon Bearer, so that's 5 attacks, hitting on 3s. And that is 3 hits. There's no AP on these, so this is just an ordinary 2-up save, and they'll save. So far so good. Moving on to the Gore Reavers, they'll be hitting on 4s, and there's 3 out of range, so that's only 7 in range, with 4 attacks each, and that's 28 attacks. This is the kind of moment war games live for, rolling best part of 30 dice. Right, 28 attacks, hitting on 4s. And we'll see how many of those actually hit. Doesn't look like too many so far. Luckily, that was only 9 hit. I had to use some green dice because I don't own 28 red dice, I only own 12. Right, so 9 2-up saves. And only 1 fails. So after all those attacks, 33 attacks, only 1 of them gets through. I can live with that. Now we get to hit them back. A hunter on a giant bison has got a total of tough 12, so we've got 11 left. We've got 3 attacks with a spear, 4 stomp attacks from the giant bison. So this is going to be 7 attacks, and they're all at AP2, so we'll roll them all together. Hitting on 3s, and that is 4 hits. Like I say, these are all AP2. Gore Reavers have got a 5-up save, so this will be 6s to save, because you always save on a 6 in this game, and 2 save, so 2 die. Now for the purposes of the end of morale melee, the bison also gives the hunter fear for an extra D3 wounds to see who wins the melee, but because we've already won the melee 2 to 1, we'll ignore that. So it's a morale test for the Gore Reavers using the Blood Icon Bearer's quality of 3-up, which passes. So they just simply fall back 1 inch, and we'll move on to the Ogre's next activation. So I did decide in the end to charge in with the champion on his beast. The reason being, again, according to the laws of probability, it will be the brass beast that activate next. So I'm hoping that by charging this guy in, hopefully killing off one of them, ideally more than one, will nerf them a bit for when they do activate, assuming that the attacks that come back aren't too tough. But at the minute, this guy's got a 2-up defense. It's normally 3, but because of the upgrades I gave him, he's got 2-up defense, and his weapons aren't bad either. So his main weapons got AP2, the beast weapons are AP1, so we might be able to get some through. He hits on 3s. Right, so let's see whether my gamble pays off. Starting things off with the impact hits from the Fang Beast. So this is 2-up saves, 4 of them. And 2 wounds get through. That's a good start. They've got tough 3, so one's down to 1 wound left. We've got 3 hand weapon attacks hitting on 3s. And 2 hit. These are at -2, so these will be 4-up saves. And another one fails, so that's a dead beast, brass beast. And then finally we've got 4 stomp attacks, hitting on 3s. All hit, these are AP 1. So 3-up saves, and they'll pass. Okay, so far a total of 3 damage done. Brass Beast will now get a chance to hit back. 2 hand weapons hitting on 3s. Both miss, I like that. 6 hoof attacks hitting on 3s. And only 3 of them hit. These are AP 1. So this will be 3-up saves, and they'll save. I'm quite happy with that. Right, now both of these have got fear. So far, the Brass Beast Riders have done no damage, and the champion has done 3. So even if the Brass Beast Riders roll a 6 on this, which they don't, they will still not be able to win the melee. So they now need to take a morale check of a 3-up, which passes. And now the champion didn't destroy them, so he has to withdraw an inch, but I think that's a gamble that will have paid off, because those Brass Beast Riders, when they activate, they'll now be hitting on 6s because they fought in melee. Speaking of which, let's see which unit activates next. It will be the Brass Beast Riders. Now we have a bit of a conundrum, because both of my units that are near them, both of them are now equidistant from the Brass Beast Riders, so they can't charge the nearest one because they're both equidistant. So I think logically, following the decision tree, they should be going for the nearest objective as well. So I think they can charge the Beast Riders purely because they're the ones that are nearest the objective that they're trying to capture. That's the logic I'm using. Whether or not a bloodthirsty, psychopathic demon from the Rift would think the same, I don't know. But that's what's going to happen. And at the end of the movement, it looks like that. We'll go into the combat. To start things off, the Brass Beast Riders have got impact 3 each, so this will be 6 4-up saves. And 3 of them pass, 3 fail. One was down on 1 wound left, so that one on 1 wound left will die, and another will go down to 4 wounds left. Onto the attacks, we've got 2 hand weapons hitting on 3s. Sorry, 6s now, because they've been in combat already. And neither hit. And then 6 hoof attacks. Also hitting on 6s. Oh, there's 3 6s. How unlikely is that? And these are AP 1, so these will be 5-up saves. And 1 gets saved, 2 go through, putting that wounded Beast Rider down to 2 wounds left. 5 wounds inflicted in total by the Brass Beast Riders. Beast Riders fighting back, 6 attacks from the hand weapons, hitting on 6s, because we've already fought in combat. And that's no hits. And then 6 claw attacks, also hitting on 6s, and no 6s there either. Okay, so that's the end of the melee. The melee morale check, the Brass Beast Riders would win because they've inflicted 5 wounds to none from the Beast Riders. There's no point in using their fear ability because they've already won it, so we'll just simply do a morale check on the Beast Riders, and this is a 4-up test. And that is a 4. So that's a pass, which I'm quite relieved about. So I'm now back with the conundrum of what to do over on this side of the battlefield. Do I go with the hunter who was already fought and see if we can tickle these down a bit, or do we go with this guy who's still fresh, bearing in mind he'll probably then get charged by these guys, so if he charges them first he'll have to take 2 charges from these units. Okay, so I've double checked the rules. Units making a charge move can ignore the 1-inch restriction, so the Ice Mammoth can fit through that gap and charge that unit, and I think that's what I'm going to do, because that will be the next unit to activate. There's only these 2 units that haven't activated. This one is closest to an uncontrolled objective, so that on its activation it will charge me, and they will gain the benefit of Furious with extra attacks. So I think I want to try and whittle them down a little bit first, and then risk getting charged by that unit as well. At the end of the movement it looks like this. We're in base-to-base contact with the Lord of War, and we'll move into the dice rolling. Starting with crew attacks, which is 6 attacks hitting on 4s, and that's 4 hits. No AP, so 4 up saves, and 3 fail. That's enough to kill one of the Death Reapers. That's a good start. Then we've got 4 stomp attacks, hitting on 4s. Only 1 hit this time. This is AP2, so this will be a 6 up save, which fails, so that's 1 Death Reaper and 1 down to 2 wounds left. The Lord of War has got 3 attacks with his great weapon. He also gets +1 to melee rolls, as does the rest of the unit, because he's got the Blessing of War. So this will hit on 2s with his great weapon. And all 3 hit. This is AP2, so these will be 4 up saves, and they all save. The Hound Companion is 2 attacks, again hitting on 2s, because of the Blessing of War. They both hit. These are AP1, so these will be 3 up saves, and both of those save. Finally, the Death Reapers have got 2 hand weapons at 1 attack each, so that's 2 attacks each. And now these have got rending, so 6s will be AP4, natural 6s, and these would normally hit on 3s, so this will be 2s again, because of the Blessing of War, so they all hit, and there's 1 natural 6, so that will be AP4. So we'll do the 6, so this is going to be a 6 up save, and that gets through, so that's 1 wound. And then the other 3 are just regular 2 up saves, and 1 of those fails as well. So that is 2 wounds got through. Ice Mammoth's a tough 9, so with 2 wounds that puts it down to 7 wounds left. The Ice Mammoth inflicted 4 wounds, the War Disciples inflicted 2. The Ice Mammoth also has fear, whereas the War Disciples don't. So the Ice Mammoth won the melee, so this is going to be a 3 up morale check on the War Disciples, and that passes. So moving on to the War Disciples, it will be that same unit that now attacks, and they will simply charge the Ice Mammoth after it falls back an inch. The Ice Mammoth fell back an inch, the Death Reapers and the Lord of War charged in as far as they could, and there's no impact from any of these weapons, so we'll go into the dice rolling again, and now everything's going to be hitting on 6s because everything has already been involved in combat. Lord of War fighting first, and this time, even though he's got Blessing of War, it's only unmodified 6s that count as hits, so 3 attacks with his great weapon, no hits, 2 attacks from his Hound, 1 hit, and this will be AP2, so a 4 up save, which fails, so that's 1 more wound, down to 6 left on the Ice Mammoth. 4 attacks from the Death Reapers, and no hits there. Ice Mammoth fighting back with its crew attacks, no successes. 4 stomp attacks, no successes. So The War Disciples inflicted 1 wound. The Ice Mammoth has fear, and that's 1 back, so it's a draw in terms of morale. The only unit left to activate for the Ogres is the Hunter on the Giant Bison, so it will now charge, and we'll see what damage that does. Again, no impact. As before, all 7 attacks from the Spear and the Stomps, all together because they're all AP2. Hitting on unmodified 6s. And there's 2 6s. This will be 6-up saves. There's no 6s, so that's 2 wounds inflicted on the Gore Reavers. Hitting back, no Furious this time because they haven't charged. This will be 4 attacks from the Icon Bearer on unmodified 6s. And none of those hit. 6 Gore Reavers left with 3 attacks each because 2 attacks base and 1 extra from the Blood Icon Bearer, hitting on 6s. And there are 3 6s. No AP from these, 2-up saves, and they'll save. So, 3-up morale check because the Hunter on the Bison won the melee, and that passes. And the only unit that hasn't activated yet are these Blood Warriors. They will charge in on the Ice Mammoth. Right, after movement, pilings, etc., it looks like this, and with space constraints, these 3 at the back won't be in range. Now, a little bit of rule interpretation here. This unit has got an upgrade, which is the Banner of War, which gives the unit impact 1. You upgrade 1 model, but it gives the unit impact 1. Now, the way I'm interpreting that, because it's a 45-point upgrade, that effectively means there should be 10 impacts coming in on this, because it's for the unit, and the unit has got 10 models in it, rather than it just being 1 impact, because 45 points is quite a lot for an automatic hit if you charge in. Whereas this guy down here, he's got a 90-point upgrade to stick him on this, which gives him impact 4, as well as tough 3, as well as fast, etc, etc. Fast and fear. So, 45 points, I think it's supposed to be every model in the unit gets an impact 1. So that'll be 10 impacts coming in on the Mammoth. These get impacts, this doesn't. 10 2-up saves. 1 fail. Puts it down to 5 wounds left. 7 hand weapon attacks hitting on 3s. And that's 2 fail. So that's 5 get through. 4-up saves. 5 4-up saves. And there's only 1 pass. So it's down to 1 wound left. 6 screw attacks hitting on 6s. There's 3 6s. That's pretty good. So this will be 3 5-up saves. And 1 passes, so that's 2 die. Then 4 stomp attacks. And there's another 2 6s. 6-up saves because these are AP2. Both those fail, so 2 more die. Right, so as it stands, we've done 4 wounds apiece, and that's the end of the melee. Both of these units have fear. The Ice Mammoth because it's an Ice Mammoth, and the other one because it's got a command upgrade. So I think it comes down to whichever wins this roll off. Okay, so the Ice Mammoth got 3 extra wounds to count towards its total, which takes it up to 7. The Blood Warriors get 2 extra wounds, which take it up to 6. So the Ice Mammoth won the melee. So unless there's an FAQ out there that I haven't seen, I don't think we need to take a morale check, because it hasn't lost in melee, so the results in the book wouldn't apply. Yeah, please tell me if you think I've got that right or wrong. And again, looking at the main rule book, there is a paragraph under combat resolution on page 15. It says, if one unit caused more wounds than the other, then it counts as the winner, and the opposing unit must take a morale test. Note that in melee, only the loser takes a morale test regardless of casualties. So yeah, I'm going to say that the Blood Warriors have to take the morale test. They'd have to take a morale test anyway, but I'm going to say the Ice Mammoth doesn't, even though it's only got 1 wound left. Again, comments below. But that is a failed morale test for the Blood Warriors, so they are now wavered. So at the end of quite a long, complex and controversial turn 2, the Ogres are in control of Objective 3 and Objective 2. Objective 5 is contested, Objective 1 is contested, and the War Disciples are in control of Objective 4. So moving into turn 3, it will be the Ogres who get to activate again first, because they finished activating first. But in terms of unit size, things are a little more even now that a unit of the War Disciples has been routed. Turn 3, thought process for Ogre's first activation. Again, it's the Brass Beast Riders that are most likely to activate first for the War Disciples. If it's not them, it'll be this unit of Gore Reavers with the Blood Icon Bearer. Right. If it is these guys, I don't particularly want them charging into these. There's one with 2 wounds left, and as we've already seen, these guys are pretty good at stripping wounds off. These guys not so much. It's my own fault for not giving them the weapons upgrade to give them AP2, I think. But yeah, so if they charge into these guys, which is what probably will happen, I risk losing this unit because they may get wavered or even routed. And I don't particularly want that because there's a pretty good chance of it because I've only got 4 up quality. So I'm tempted to activate this guy first, charge into them, hopefully do them some damage so that any damage they might inflict on anything else will be limited. On the flip side, over here, we've got the hunter on his giant bison. If these guys activate first, they will charge this guy. And again, we've got all the extra attacks from Furious and the Blood Icon Bearer. Now this guy did pretty well at shrugging off all those attacks last time. I don't know if he can do that twice in a row. But we've also got the option of this guy activating, and with his Aura of Frost, or whatever it's called, he can give 2 units within 6 inches, 2 enemy units within 6 inches, -1 to hit. So that would be good on these guys with all those attacks, and also on them, because they're getting +1 to hit from the Blessing of War on the Lord of War. And then it can charge into these guys and hopefully rout them. So for now, I think I'm going to play the odds and hope that it's this unit that activates first, so that we can then do something over here. And we will go for the champion charging in on the Brass Beasts and see if we can whittle them down a bit. And at the end of the movement, the champion has charged in to the flank of the Brass Beast Riders. Not that it gives them any advantage, it's just more positioning wise. So again, these guys, when they activate, they're more likely to charge one of these units rather than, because it's an uncontrolled objective, rather than head towards this one that I've had to leave undefended, but it still counts as captured. So going into the dice rolling with the impact charge. Started things off with the 4 impact saves of 2 up, and they all save. 3 hand weapon attacks hit on 3s. They all miss. Grief. That was my best chance at doing some damage. 3 claws attacks hit on 3s. 1 hits. And this will be a 3-up save, which saves. So yeah, that plan hasn't worked so far. Now they get a chance to fight back. 2 hand weapons. 1 hits. AP2, so this is a 4-up save. And that fails, so it takes a wound. Down to 5 left. So far it's winning the melee. And then 6 hoof attacks. Hitting on 3s. And that's 3 hit. These are AP -1, so 3-up saves. And they all make it, so it takes 1 wound. Now both have fear. Both units have fear. So that's 3 extra wounds for the champion, 1 extra wound considered for the Brass Beast Riders. So that will be a total of 2 wounds effectively inflicted by the Brass Beast Riders, 1 actual wound and 1 for fear, and then 3 inflicted by the champion, no actual wounds plus 3 for fear. So the champion has won the melee, so this will be a morale check on the Brass Beast Riders, and it passes on 3 up. So now the champion has to fall back out of combat after doing no damage whatsoever to them, but losing a wound himself, so less than ideal. And we'll see which unit activates first. And it is indeed the Brass Beast Riders, so at least now they'll be hit on 6s, because they've already fought in melee this turn. This is another situation where we need to make a judgment call, because again both units are equidistant. The Ogre Beast Riders and the champion, they're both 1 inch away from the Brass Beast Riders, and they're both sat on the same objective. Now, from a narrative perspective, I think it makes sense for these angry demons to retaliate against the unit that just did them some, or tried to do them some harm in their rage, rather than go for these guys. I don't know what you think, but for me, I think that's the narrative thing to do. They would attack the guy that just tried to damage them. So that's what we'll do. Rightly or wrongly, again, let me know below what you think. Just realised that these guys have got Furious, which I might have forgotten in previous charges that they may or may not have made. So, oh well, can't go back now. Right, 3 impact attacks each, so that's 6 2-up saves on the champion. And he makes them all. Now with Furious, we'll give that to the hand weapons, so this will be 2 attacks each, hitting on 6s, so 4 attacks in total, and there's no 6s, so they all miss, and then 3 attacks each from Hooves, hitting on 6s again. Would you look at that, 4 6s! Maybe I should use red dice more often. These are AP ones, so these will be 3-up saves. And makes them all, so I'll take it back, white dice. So now a chance for the champion to hit back again. 3 hand weapons, hit on 6s. Not a 1. And 3 claw attacks, hitting on 6s. Again, not a 1. So no damage done by either one in melee. Both have fear, and both won again. So no victors, no losers. The Brass Beast Riders will fall back an inch out of combat. Okay, over here, like I said earlier, it will be this unit that activates next, because they are the nearest unit. It has to be one of these units that activates, because they're all in the same area. And it will be this unit that activates, because they're the closest unit to an uncontrolled objective, which is currently being contested by this big boy here. So I think what I'll do is activate this guy. So again, as mentioned before, we can put -1 to hit on these, -1 to hit on them. These guys are wavered, so they're only going to hit on 6s anyway, and I think we'll simply charge in with these guys into them. 6 crew attacks, hit on 4s. And that's 3 hits. No AP, so 5-up saves. And 1 fail, so 2 die. Then 4 stomp attacks, hit on 4s. Ooh, look at that. 3 successes. These will be 6-up saves. And they all fail. That will leave 1 left. The 1 remaining Blood Warrior gets a chance to hit back on a 6, which fails. So they've already automatically lost the melee. They'll have to take a morale test. and because they're already wavered, they'll automatically fail, so that unit is routed. And with its 3-inch consolidation move, it simply reversed back towards Objective 3 to keep a bit of a roadblock between Objective 3 and the Lord of War with his bodyguard. I was thinking about moving him forwards 3 inches towards Objective 4. I wouldn't be able to actually get there to contest it, so I would be leaving a gap open for the Lord of War to get through to this objective down here, and I want to carry on having captured that. So moving on to the War Disciples activation. Don't really need to roll for it because there's only units in this zone that have yet to activate, and it will be those Gore Reavers with the Blood Icon Bearer, and they will charge in on the Hunter on his giant bison. At the end of the charge movement it looks something like that. They're all in range for attack, so we'll move into the dice rolling. Starting things off with the Blood Icon Bearer. 3 attacks normally, but with Furious and the Blood Icon, that takes him up to 5 attacks. This time he's hitting on 4s because he's -1, courtesy of the Ice Mammoth. And in spite of that, he still gets 4 through. 4 2-up saves, and 1 gets through. So 6 Gore Reavers left with 4 attacks each, 2 normally, plus 1 for Furious, plus 1 for the Blood Icon Bearer. So 24 attacks, hitting on 5s this time, again courtesy of the Ice Mammoth. Total of 7 got through, so 7 more 2-up saves. And there's another wound gone. So that's 2 wounds inflicted. 7 attacks, hitting on 3s, all at AP2. That's 3 from the spear, 4 from stomps. And that is 5 hits. AP2, so this will be 6s to save. And do you believe there's 2 6s? But 3 more Gore Reavers die. So that is more wounds inflicted. And with Fear, the Giant Bison will automatically win the combat anyway. So they now make a morale check using the Blood Icon Bearer's morale quality, which is 3 up, and that passes on yet another 6 from the red dice. So the Gore Reavers will now fall back an inch out of combat, and onto the Ogres activation. For the Ogres we've got 2 options. We can either activate the Giant Bison, who can charge into these guys and hopefully finish them off, but he will be hitting on 6s because he's already fought in combat. Alternatively, we've got the 2 Ogre Beast Riders, and again we've got some options there. We can either charge into these guys and hopefully do some more damage to them, or they can charge over onto these guys, which should be more effective than this guy charging in, because there'll be 8 immediate hits courtesy of the impact and then the weapons as well. So might not wipe them out, but you never know. Yeah, but that will leave this guy on his own, facing down 2 Brass Beast Riders on the next turn. Do I want to consolidate this flank, or do we want to strengthen the centre, bearing in mind that this guy's probably going to die? So I think, yeah, what we'll do is bring this guy, these guys charging over into these guys, and hopefully then be in control of that objective at the end of the turn. And at the end of the charge move it looks like that. We'll go into the dice rolling. Starting off with 8 impact saves of 5 up. The majority of the unit still has a 5 up defence. There's 4 5s. The 4 wounds get through, so that will kill off the last 3 Gore Reavers and inflict 1 wound on the Icon Bearer. 6 hand weapon attacks against the Icon Bearer. And only 1 hits. Now because there is just the Icon Bearer there now, we have to use his defence, and that is 3 up, so this will be a 3 up save, which passes on yet another red 6. Then 6 claws attacks, hit on 4s, and again only 1 hit. AP -1 this time, so this will be a 4 up save, which fails. So the Icon Bearer is down to 1 wound left. He can now fight back. Ordinarily 3 attacks, but 1 extra because he's got the icon. So this will hit on 6s, unmodified 6s, because they've already fought in melee, or he has already fought in melee, and they all miss. And he will now have to take a morale check of 3 up, and that's a 2. So it is now routed, because it's already lost more than half the models, and it's in melee, so that is another unit routed. With their 3-inch consolidation move, the Beast Riders have backed up a little bit so as to leave a gap for this big boy to charge through, or rather rush through towards that objective when he gets a chance to activate. The next unit to activate will be these guys, and they will charge into the Ice Mammoth and see if they can finish it off. The Lord of War and the Death Reapers have charged around the Ice Mammoth so as to get a bit closer to one of these 2 objectives, and they will now use the attacks. But they are at -1 to hit, courtesy of the Ice Mammoth from earlier. Lord of War has got 3 attacks with his great weapon, quality of 3 up. He's got the Blessing of War, which would normally give him +1 to hit, but he's also -1 to hit, courtesy of the Ice Mammoth, so just simple 3 up attacks. And 2 get through. These are AP2, so 4 up saves, and 1 fails, so that is a dead Ice Mammoth. And with their consolidation move, they've moved 3 inches closer to objective 1 in the centre, because that was the closest objective. The only unit left to activate is the Giant Bison. Now that makes things interesting, because on the next turn it means that the War Disciples will get the first activation, because they will have finished activating first. Right, I originally said the Giant Bison was going to rush towards that objective over there, but I've decided instead to charge these guys in the rear, so that we've got, again, a bit of a roadblock in front of this objective that we still count as having captured. 7 attacks, 3 from the spear, 4 from stomps, hitting on unmodified 6s. Oh look, 3 white 6s. That unit is defense 4 up, courtesy of the Death Reapers, because there's 2 of them and only 1 Lord of War, so this will be 6 up saves, and there's not a 1, so that will be enough to kill 1 Death Reaper. And they can now fight back by moving in 3 inches. And I realised earlier that I forgot in any charges that unit made that they've got Furious as well. So we'll start off with the Great Weapon, and because they didn't charge they don't get Furious, so this will be 3 attacks hitting on unmodified 6s, so again the Blessing of War doesn't come into play. Nope, nothing there. 2 attacks from the Hound, nothing, and 2 attacks from Death Reaper. 1 hit, and that was a 6, so that's AP4 because they've got Rending. So this will be a 6 up save, which fails, so that'll be 1 more damage on the Beast Rider, and that should put him, pretty sure that was on a 6. That'll put him down to 8 wounds left. But the Giant Bison has already won the combat, so the Lord of War and the remaining Death Reaper have to take a morale check, which they fail, and because there's less than half the units left, they're routed. And at the end of turn 3, it looks like this. The Ogres are in control, again, of Objective 1. They are still in control of Objective 2 and Objective 3. The War Disciples are still in control of Objective 4, and Objective 5 is still contested. So moving into turn 4, which is the last turn, it looks like it will be a victory for the Ogres. It's just whether or not these Brass Beast Riders can do anything to control any more objectives, which is highly unlikely. Right into turn 4, and it will be the Brass Beast Riders activating, because that's the only unit left for the War Disciples, and the Ogres activate at last, so the Brass Beast Riders will activate first, and they will simply charge in on the Ogre champion on his beast. Starting things off with 6 2-up saves from impact, and 2 of those get through, putting the Beast Rider champion down to 3 wounds left. And then remembering Furious, we'll put that on their hand weapons, so that will give them 2 attacks each. That's 4 attacks hitting on 3s, and that's 2 hit. These are AP 2, so these will be 4-up saves. 1 successful, 1 fails, so that's 2 wounds left. 3 wounds inflicted so far by the Brass Beast Riders, and finally 6 hoof attacks, hitting on 3s, and 3 hit. These are AP 1, so this will be 3-up saves, and 1 fails, so it leaves the Beast Rider champion on 1 wound left. So that's 4 wounds inflicted by the Brass Beast Riders. Champion now hitting back, 3 hand weapon attacks on 3s, and that's 2 hit at AP 2, so this will be 4-up saves, 1 successful, 1 fails, so 1's down to 2 wounds left. 3 claw attacks hit on 3s, 2 successful, these are AP 1, so 3-up saves, and they both pass. Now both units have fear, however the Brass Beast Riders have already inflicted 3 more wounds than the Beast Rider champion, so they'll automatically win the combat, so this will be a 3-up morale test on the Beast Rider champion, which it passes on a 4. For the Ogre's activation, the Giant Bison Rider has simply rushed forwards onto Objective 4, because it wouldn't be able to charge all the way over here into the Brass Beast Riders. The next activation for the Ogres will be these Beast Riders here, charging in on the Brass Beast Riders, and then the final activation, the champion will charge the Brass Beast Riders, but these guys first because they're fresher. Looks like this after movement. Starting things off with 8 impact saves of 2-up, and they all pass. 6 hand weapon attacks hitting on 4s, and that is 4 successes. And this is 2-up saves because there's no AP on the hand weapons from the Ogres, and they all save. And finally 6 claw attacks hitting on 4s, 2 successes, and these are AP 1, so these will be 3-up saves, and 1 fails, so that's 1 wound inflicted on the Brass Beast Riders. Brass Beast Riders will now get a chance to retaliate. 2 hand weapons, they didn't charge, so no Furious. Hitting on unmodified 6s because they've already fought in melee, and there's 1 hit. This will be a 6-up save because it's AP 2, and that saves. Yay, a white 6. 6 hoof attacks hitting on 6s, and 2 hit. These are AP 1, so saving on 5s. There's 1 5, so that wounded Beast Rider and 1 wound left. So that's 1 wound inflicted apiece, but the Brass Beast Riders have fear, the Ogre Beast Riders don't. So this will be a 4-up morale check on the Ogre Beast Riders, which they fail, so they are now wavered. Because it doesn't matter, I mean these guys are wavered, so they don't count as contesting that objective. This guy's got 1 wound left, so if these guys get lucky on their return strikes, it could finish him off. But that doesn't matter because the Ogres have still captured more objectives than the War Disciples. So because it doesn't matter, we will do this combat. I was thinking about just leaving him back there to contest that objective, which means the War Disciples wouldn't get any points. But yeah, just for the sake of it, he's going to charge in, see if he can do any damage, and hopefully survive on 1 wound left. 4 2-up impact saves, all pass. 3 hand weapon attacks hitting on 6s because he's already fought in melee, and 3 5s, no 6s. That was his best shot at doing some damage. 3 claw attacks hitting on 6s, nothing. So no wounds inflicted. Fighting back, 2 hand weapon attacks on 6s. There's a 6. Saving on a 4-up, which fails, it's dead. And at the end of the 4th and final turn, the Ogres still control Objective 2. They also control Objective 1 and 3 and 4. These Ogres are wavered, so they can't count as contesting Objective 5, so the War Disciples hold Objective 5, so that's 1 point to them. But the Ogres win 4 points to 1. These 2 remaining Brass Beast Riders will flee back into the rift, and the remaining Ogres will scavenge the shards of the meteorite to investigate any magical properties it might have. Or maybe it's just shiny green things that Ogres think are pretty. They might find their way into armour decorations or such like. Until next time.